Hey guys, so as Vanguard is just out, I thought it would be a good idea to give you a quick overview on some of the settings that I'm using in-game. I'm playing on the PlayStation 5 with a 120Hz monitor, and I've got a PS5 back paddle controller with some Penrose Audis headset. But aside from that, some of the things that I find are really beneficial and help me actually play and improve as a player are some of the settings that I've been using since Modern Warfare, which I refined in Cold War, which I now find to be the best settings for Vanguard as it stands. This is also pretty translatable to Warzone as well, especially with a new update coming out on December 3rd. So let's get right into it. We'll start with controller. So I started with a sort of 8 sensitivity across both. I've kind of found that as I'm trying to engage longer distance fights, I'm going to have to pull my sensitivity down slightly. I do tend to hover between 6, 7 and 8. It depends how I'm feeling. If I'm kind of tired, I'll go down to 6. If I'm feeling quite hyper, I've had a Red Bull for example, I'll pull it all the way back up to 8. This is kind of irrelevant for goods vehicle sensitivity multiplayer. I won't mention everything. What I'll do is I'll just mention the kind of things that I think are relevant. So for ADS sensitivity multiplier, I often have this between 0.8 and 0.9. I'm trying 0.9. I did try 1, but 0.9 is kind of where I'm sitting at the minute. I play with R1 and L1 as shoot, just because for some reason I feel like, and maybe this isn't the case, that it takes slightly longer to pull the distance between R2 and the actual controller responding to the feedback is slightly longer than pressing R1. So I've actually had this flipped. I guess typically play with tactical on, but because I've got the paddles which I've assigned as X to jump, and the left paddle, which is kind of where my index finger sits, would be crouch, so slide. I've got the rest of these things as standard. Controller vibration off, trigger effect off, weapon threshold, fire off, ADF sensitivity. Okay, again, this isn't too relevant. Let's have a look. So for stuff like this is not too relevant. Dead zone, so dead zone. Okay, so that's mostly everything in the controller settings. So let's go to aim assist. So I've been trying to toy between precision and default. I don't want to mess with too many things at the minute just because the game is brand new. I think I'm going to sit with default. For now, I would suggest that if you have pretty accurate, I guess, precision aim, I would probably maybe experiment with the two, but I would typically go for default. So for blind fire, I haven't actually used it. I don't know whether there's some kind of button you need to press to initiate it. I haven't used it yet. I was mentioning before in an old video, and I did the same for Warzone as well, I have automatic tac sprint on. I find that my thumb starts to get quite painful if I'm always pressing in the sprint button, so I kind of let my finger do it automatically by having it forward. I've got the same setting on Warzone as well. Sprint, cancel, reload, that saved me a bunch of times. Effectively, all you have to do is push forward and you stop reloading. It can get quite tricky to kind of get used to, especially if you have automatic tac sprint on, because effectively as soon as you move forward rather than sprint, it automatically cancels the reload. Door bashing on, action behavior tap. So a lot of people try to slide cancel and they actually don't realize you have to have this on tap rather than on hold. So having this on tap just means you can effectively tap slide. So effectively what you'd do is, if you had the back paddles on, you would slide and then effectively jump up, but you'd tap them both at the same time. So you'd do slide, jump, jump, and effectively that will reset your automatic tac sprint. It's not too important for games like multiplayer TDM, more so for Warzone where you try to either outsprint the gas, push players for example, but it's just, I'm so used to it in Warzone, and that's where I spent a lot of my time, that it feels kind of unnatural to not have it on. Everything else is fairly standard. Obviously you'd have aim down sight on, hold, steady aim behavior, hold. All of this stuff is kind of at this point just a preference. Here we go. So 120 Hertz, massive if you're on either PC, you could probably go higher. PS5, I'm not sure about PS4 Pro. I think this is only a PS5 feature, but having that on is awesome. Field of view, again, this is a new thing that they introduced in Cold War. My gut feeling is that this will actually be in Warzone as well, because they're going to be using the same Vanguard engine in Warzone, and that's one of the reasons they couldn't have introduced it earlier, because it was on the old Modern Warfare Warzone engine, which didn't have depth of field or field of view. So I've played with 105 to 100. 105 feels slightly too far out. 80, if you believe it or not, was what you traditionally play on. But that 100 gives you a little bit more space to look. You've got a bit more of a field of view, but you're not sacrificing any sort of distance. A lot of my friends often actually played on 120, and they were saying that they couldn't see players that I could, and I think a lot of that had to do with the field of view. All of this stuff, world motion blur, weapon motion blur, I actually had depth of field off, so I don't know why that's been turned on, but I'll have all of those off. Depending on your internet, I have on-demand texture streaming. I've got fiber to the premises, which is about 500 downloads, so I can afford to do this. If you don't, and you have slightly slower internet, I would probably advise turning this off. For sound, I haven't messed around too much with this. I'm liking the classic hit markers, but I'm also just going with the audio mix. Killstreak music off, mono audio off. The rest of this is fairly up to you. As are these. I've just put the FOV counter on, server latency on. Is just interesting to see whilst you're playing. So for the most part, that's pretty much it. I hope those sort of guide to the new settings for Vanguard have given you some sort of an idea of what you should be sort of aiming for as a base. What I would do is then go around, mess around with sensitivity. If you feel like it's slightly too low, bump it up a little bit higher. Just get a feel for what feels good to you, and hopefully this gave you a bit of a guide to sort of getting back to basics on how to set your game up.